There is a political warning sign for VP Harris in key battleground states, according to the New York Times. Two leading Democratic groups say that the push to reach younger and minority voters needs more money ASAP. They point to recent internal data from those states and say Harris must have these voters as part of her coalition if she wants to win in November. So let's discuss. Jason Johnson, who I have not seen in ages, is in town, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University. He, of course, is an MSNBC political contributor as well. And Mike Madrid is here, former political director of California's Republican Party, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Jason, these groups are trying to tell donors that just because Kamala Harris is a woman of color, do not automatically assume they're going to get out and vote for her. What do you think of this warning? Because just quickly, she's pulling the hell out of Donald Trump with a double-digit lead in youth voters.
Oh, yeah. Look, she's up by 31. She's doing better than Joe Biden. But this is normal. Like Stephanie, honestly, you can look at 2020. You can look at 2016. People say the same thing every year. You're not giving us some money. There's never a campaign season where someone is saying, I think we're good on money, right?
Correct.
They're always asking for more. I think with this particular generation, though, the political class has to catch up on how to communicate with them. They get so much of their information from TikTok. They get so much of their information from Instagram. They're not getting it from TV. They're certainly not getting it from Facebook. Facebook is for their grandparents now. And I think that the campaigns can be more sophisticated in getting into the algorithm, figuring out the algorithm, and communicating with the young people. That can always be done.
You are a college professor. Is it working? You and I talked about this 6 months ago, 9 months ago. We talked about the double haters. We talked about young people not being excited or inspired by a Donald Trump and a Joe Biden. What are your focus group of your students? What are you learning?
So at the beginning of every semester, I do a just what do you know quiz, right? Ask them 10 questions. You know, who shot Megan Thee Stallion in the foot? Who's the governor? I ask basic things like this just to see where they are. 23 out of my 25 students knew what Project 2025 was.
Because they all watch 11th Hour.
Because, of course, because they were watching. They said, Stephanie told us this.
Perfect, yes.
And it's amazing because students who don't know who the governor is know that Project 2025 is something bad. It's because they're in the LGBTQ community. It's because they care about immigration. It's because they care about abortion. That is something that has gotten through. And since I know that they only get their information from TikTok, it makes sense that groups are asking Harris to focus more there. But the Democrats have a hit with this policy because it is something that is motivating young people to vote against Trump and for Harris in ways that we didn't see in 2020, we didn't see in 2016.
Mike, it also seems like they're arguing that at this point in the race, mobilizing voters is more important than making new ads. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say no duh.
Look, I think that's a big part of it, but I want to take us back to the previous segment with Steve Kornacki, who showed that 41% of Hispanic voters are voting for Donald Trump. Layer that with the fact that 38%, almost 40% of all Latino voters are under the age of 30. And folks, we need to start being honest about what's going on here. The youth vote and the Latino vote are basically the same thing. So the challenge is not just mobilization. There's a persuasion problem that still has to happen, and days are getting short now. They're going to have to tighten up their message game as well as completely fund these mobilization efforts if they're going to bring that 41% back into a historically high range, which we saw in 2020, which was about 35%. So there's a complete overlap between the Latino vote and this youth vote, and I don't think it's as simply as communicating. There's a lot of persuasion that still has to happen here.
I don't know. Do you agree with that, Jason? Because when we talk to Latino voters, right, Latinos are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in this country, who time and again polling shows that they care about deregulation and lowering taxes. And I don't see a huge overlap there with people, with the young people you're talking about.
Right. No, this is not the case at all. What you have happening with the Latino vote in America is primarily it's also driven by men. And Latino men have found Trump very attractive, very appealing, just like you see that with some African-American men. That's where those numbers are coming from. But that's completely different than the youth vote. The youth vote, in fact, I think, and Kornacki has sometimes talked about this, we are missing a lot of young voters, just like we missed them in 2022, because first-time voters who came of age, who came politically active after the ending of Roe, those people aren't being polled because they don't answer phones because we don't even know how to get their phones. I think there's probably a wellspring of young voters who are out there enthusiastic about Harris, and they're going to be a larger number than the shy Trump voters who I think at this point have disappeared.
All right, let's talk about A reporter asked Speaker Johnson today about the House's role in certifying the results of the election. Like, we can dance around polls and are people turning out the vote. What we're talking about right now, this matters. Listen to what Speaker Johnson said.
Mr. Speaker, do you commit to observing regular order in the certification process of the 2024 election, even if Kamala Harris beats Donald Trump?
Well, of course, if we have a free, fair, and safe election, we're going to follow the Constitution. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so let's remind our audience, Mike, 2020 was a free, fair, and safe election. And yet Mike Johnson, right there, voted to overturn those results. How does this man, the Speaker of the House, get away with saying he is going to follow the Constitution with a big old if attached to it?
Look, if I had $1 for every time I looked at one of my former Republican brethren and tried to answer that same question and where their shame went, I'd be a very wealthy man. Look, they're going to keep saying this. They're going to say, yeah, we'll follow it as long as it's, a fair and honest election. And then when it doesn't break in their direction, they're going to say this was not a fair and honest election. I mean, that's the ruse. That's the shell game here. And I think that he's more than prepared to do that. He demonstrated that by voting to that effect. And I think that he's probably lining up his caucus to do precisely the same thing again in 2024.
Jason?
He's lying. There is no fair election that Trump doesn't get reelected. Like that is the attitude of many of the Republican elites, not necessarily Republicans on the ground, not necessarily Republicans voting in Georgia and North Carolina, but that is what the elite power, that's what the members of Congress think. So he will not certify unless he is absolutely forced to do so. And I fear, and I don't think I'm unique in this, I fear more
if he's
violence.
absolutely forced to do so, or if Donald John Trump wins.
Exactly. Yeah, Trump wins, and of course, it's a free and fair election, right? Now, we're not even getting into questions of voter suppression to happen in Texas, voter suppression to happen in Georgia and North Carolina, but those are the only elections that they think are legitimate. And I really do fear that if Harris is to win, if she wins the popular vote and she wins the Electoral College, which there's a possibility, we don't know, we're still 6 or 7 weeks away, I fear violence. I mean, January 6th was a test run. And there's been 4 years of many people not being held accountable for what they did 4 years ago. And there's no reason for them to not do it again if they're unhappy with the results.
Michael, the Washington Post is reporting that elections officials are trying to get out ahead of conspiracy theories and lies, and they're now trying to offer a whole new level of transparency. They're giving tours, open houses, actually putting their work on live streams, right, to say, here it is, America. But will any of that make a difference if people are determined to sow doubt, and if other people are open to those conspiracy theories because they don't want to believe what they see right before their eyes?
No, I don't think that it will. I think that if there are enough people determined to cause chaos in the election, then it's going to happen. Look, on the Lincoln Project in 2020, we were perfectly prepared to we were fully expecting that there would be problems what are called the chain of custody of the ballots. And this doesn't have to happen in, urban areas or heavily Hispanic or black precincts or strong, blue regions of a state. These can happen in deep red areas where you've got candidates or parties or people who want to cause trouble and cause uncertainty in the race simply by messing with what we call the chain of custody. Who touches the ballots? How are they processed? How do they get from the high school gymnasium where people are voting to the county government center? Any one ballot box can be messed with in any red county, and that causes uncertainty in the outcome of a whole state. The really dangerous, precarious moment that we have to be very mindful of is the 72 hours after the polls close. That's time when the early voting and the early processing begins, is the most vulnerable time for democracy. That's when you're going to see the most shenanigans, possibly violence, and great concern, and we need to be very, very vigilant. But just setting rules is not going to be enough. There's just too many ways to interfere with the process of counting ballots to entirely protect the system.
All right, then. Michael, thank you for joining us. Jason, great to see you in person.